Good afternoon. I am going to give you an introduction on how to approach your research in English studies. In case you cannot hear me, please let me know. Just write no if you cannot hear me, and if you can hear me, write yes. Can you hear me? Write yes if you can, write no if you can't. Please write yes if you can hear me. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Narendra. Thank you. So today I'm going to introduce you to, managing your research in English studies. And I hope that you will make a note of whatever you think you need to know. Okay, now you don't have to write yes now because I've seen that you can hear me. If for some reason someone is unable to attend today, this talk of mine will be recorded and you can always get it on my Facebook page. All right. I know that some people have sent me friend requests and I haven't been able to accept it yet, but I will soon do so. And because I have very few places left, and so I have to think a lot before I say yes. But if you are enrolled for research, then I will definitely accept your friend request. Okay, so what exactly is the meaning of doing research in English studies? What I'm trying to draw your attention to is the fact that there is a difference between doing research in English studies and doing research in another subject. All right, there is a very big difference between these two. And you must be conscious of what the difference is. First of all, remember that in order to understand the difference, you have to understand the difference between what literature is and what another subject is. Literature is not like other subjects. It has its own distinctive nature. It has its own very distinctive nature. And so, when you are doing research in English, you must never forget that you are working on a literary topic, something that is connected with literature. You are not doing research in history or philosophy or science, but you are doing research in literature. And when you do research in literature, you have to always remember this while doing your thesis. You have to remember that literature is a very different subject to other subjects. And you cannot treat it as though it were just any subject, all right? Because literature involves so many things. First of all, it involves authors, then it involves texts of various genres, then it involves an awareness of literary criticism. And very importantly, it involves awareness of contemporary literary theories. These are some of the things which are required. But one of the most important things that is required is a reasonably good command over the English language. Because if you are working in English studies, you must be able to read, write and understand the English language. Because if you do not know that, or you cannot do that, then there is no point in your trying to write a thesis. So the basic thing that you have to first do is to brush up your English language. Go back to the grammar books and see what the English language really is, because you cannot write an incorrect thesis in incorrect language. You cannot expect your guide to write everything for you. You may think that your language is sufficiently good, but it may not be. So please keep reading a lot of fiction. If you read a lot of fiction, then your language will tend to be all right. You will automatically keep learning. So your language has to be good, and your awareness of the fact that you are working in literary studies. These are some very important things. Now, when a writer says something or seems to say something, we do not know whether he himself even believes in it or she believes in it. They could just be saying something for the sake of keeping up some argument. We don't know. Because there is a difference between what a writer believes in and what he actually says. Therefore, never trust a writer entirely. Never trust what he or she is saying. But look upon what is being said as a part of a particular text. D.H. Lawrence said, "Trust the tale and not the teller." Alright? So whatever the writer is saying, he may be saying it for some reason. And we should not take the beliefs that are contained in literary texts to be very valid beliefs. But we have to see them as part of the texts. You know, the texts are, every text is in a particular genre. So, certain things have to be said in accordance with the genre in which the text is being written. Then an author can belong to a particular group or literary fashion, a movement. And the writer may be saying certain things because he or she belongs to a particular movement or group. Whether it is a personal belief or not, you cannot say. Remember that as far as writers are concerned, after the modern age began, after T.S. Eliot and Roland Barthes, people have believed that there is a death of the author. The author dies, only his text remains. So you have to just think of the text and the context. Maybe to some extent, as researchers, you need to know the context, you need to know the writer, who the writer is, because you cannot ignore the biography. But the beliefs that are contained need not be always very true. Alright? So, when you write something, you should never say that these lines mean this, or the author is saying this in these lines. Because if you say that, then you will appear to be writing a thesis of the kind that was written before the 1960s. You will not be writing a thesis which is written in our contemporary world. Today we do not ever say that the writer is saying this. You should always say it with reservation. Always say, perhaps the writer is saying such a thing. Or it seems to me that the writer is saying such a thing because of this reason. You must, as a researcher, always, if you say that a writer has said something, you must try to give a reason, a sufficiently good reason, why you believe that the writer has said something. You should not just say something and you think and believe that you have got away with what you have said. No. You have to give a proper reason for why you feel that something is being said by you. Why have you said something? And why do you believe in what you say? You have to support whatever you say with sufficient evidence. That is the meaning of research. That you cannot say anything on your own unless you have established a certain kind of platform from where you begin to speak in your own voice. See, ultimately, a thesis is somebody's thesis. It is your thesis if you are writing it. I hope it will be your thesis and you will not, take someone else's views and present it as though they are yours. If you do that, then your thesis has zero value. Never think that you will get away with plagiarism. What is plagiarism? Taking someone's ideas or words and presenting them as though they are your words. Never think you will be able to get away with that. You must always acknowledge whose opinions you are presenting to the reader or the examiner of your thesis. You can never get away with plagiarism. Remember that. Now there are so many devices. When you submit your thesis, at that stage your thesis will be checked. And if there is any plagiarism, then you will not be able to go very far from there. Alright? So there's no point in being unfair to yourself and to your thesis. Alright? So you have to be very, very fair. That is the first thing. Then the next thing that you must remember is that whenever you say something, you have to be conscious of the fact that some others have said something before you. And you cannot just leave them out. If your thesis is a valid thesis, if it is going to make any ripples, if it is going to make any difference to scholarship, then you have to take into account what others have said before you. You can agree or disagree with others. Don't go on agreeing with others. because that will make you seem to be one who doesn't make any point in his thesis. You will not be making any point if you just keep agreeing. And you don't only have to disagree with others, you must keep a balance. And when you come to an original point, when from whatever others have said, you start forming your own opinion, then you must make it very clear that so and so has said this, so and so has said this, but I feel that this is where the truth lies. But remember, whatever you claim to be true will never be true. Because research is not something which closes after you. You only open up the road for further research. You only keep, inviting more and more people for further research. You cannot close up the matter as though what you have said is the final thing. You must open up the issue to several people after you, because only then will your thesis be valid. Because no one's discoveries or findings in a research will ever be final. Research has been going on before you and it will go on after you. So do not pretend as though you have found out the truth or the last word on a particular subject. Even if you feel that, you will always say that this is what seems to be right. After my thesis, this is what I have come to believe in. You will find certain new things during the course of the 5 or 6 years which you take to complete your research. You will find something which others have not found. And if you don't find anything, that means you have not done enough work and your thesis is not worthwhile. So you will find something new. You must, keep all that separately, and then in the end, in your conclusion, you must say, these are the findings of my research. And in the introduction also, you can say that these are the basic areas in which my thesis will proceed after you have found certain things. All right? So, research means first reading a lot, reading what others have said, and then trying to come to terms with what others have said, either agreeing or disagreeing or partly agreeing and partly disagreeing. Whatever you think ultimately about people who have worked before you, that has to be very well worked out. The better you do that, the better your thesis will be. So, you must make a note of what others have done before you, and then see where your work is heading. Remember that there is one contemporary theory called intertextuality. I would advise you to absorb that theory very well before you start writing. Why? Because that theory makes us conscious of the fact that there is no original writer. There is no one who can be called an original writer. Everyone that writes is writing or has written because they have taken something from someone, unconsciously or consciously. Even Shakespeare cannot be called an original writer, and if he cannot, then no one can. Because a writer always writes with certain other authors in mind. It is then that he becomes an author from a writer. Alright, so of course a writer does not reproduce what others have written before him, but he does unconsciously most of the time take in a lot from what others have written. So when you write your thesis, if you say this is the view of this writer, then that is not sufficient, because maybe that is not. Before him, several others have also given similar views. So as a researcher, you have to be very thorough. You must go backwards in history and see what others have said in that area, in that field before him. Alright? T.S. Eliot's theory of tradition is very important, and Julia Kristeva's intertextuality. These are things which you must know. You must know all contemporary theories. Without that, you will not be able to write a good thesis that will be considered meaningful in today's world. If you have not read contemporary theories, then you have written a thesis which will only be meaningful as, say, a modernist thesis might have been. That is, a thesis before the 1960s, because after the 1960s, there have been so many changes in the way literature is read. Alright? We do not trust anything in final terms. No interpretation is final today. So if you are giving us a very final kind of statement from your research, then your thesis is not a contemporary thesis. You must always remember that whatever you say will be deconstructed very soon by someone else. You cannot say something final, and you should never believe that you are saying something final. So, what are the things that we must remember when we begin writing our thesis? Our theses, rather. First of all, do we have a sufficiently correct language at our command? If no, and the chances are that the answer will be no, then we must start working on that from day one. Because without the English language, nothing is going to be possible unless someone else writes your thesis for you, which is not allowed. You have to write your thesis. So you have to learn the language. You may think that your language is very great, but it may not be that good. So you must try to, study grammar once again. Begin grammar properly. Read rules, books on writing. I'll give you a list in my next lecture. And you must, after that, start reading critics right from Plato downwards, Aristotle, Coleridge, Arnold, Eliot, Lewis, all these, Wordsworth, all the significant writers before the contemporary critics have to be read. It is not for nothing that you are taught literary criticism. You are taught literary criticism because every important critic or theorist has given you something which will help you to analyze your texts better. So you must have all that weaponry with you. You must have those ideas because they will help you to proceed further. And if you do not have that, then I'm afraid your thesis will be very shaky. because you will be saying something that someone has already deconstructed before you and put to naught before you. So what you must do is to ensure that you have read the major critics and you know their major contributions. No critic is useless, otherwise he would not be there in the theory books. Everyone has given something so important that his name has stayed on, and we cannot afford to be ignorant of that. And after that, we have to understand the more difficult things, contemporary theories. We must understand contemporary theories. We must know structuralism. We must know deconstruction. We must know postmodernism, post-colonial theory, feminism, Marxism, all the psychoanalytical theories, Freud and Lacan and everyone, new historicism and historicism, all these we have to know. Formalism, all the formalistic theories, we have to know all of them. Alright, so this is one part. Now remember that your thesis will always have two important parts in it. I mean, you may not mention these parts, but while you're writing, you must know in your mind about two basic parts of your thesis. Does your thesis lean towards the form of the author or text that you are taking up? Or does it lean towards content? If it leans towards form, that means if it is a formalistic approach that you are choosing. Suppose you are writing on the symbols or the imagery of some poet or of some novelist. Then your writing is tilting towards form. In that case, you should not totally ignore the content. That means you should not ignore the movement from which that writer emerges, or his basic approaches to life, his biography, etc. You cannot ignore that. You have to still know that, though your focus is on the form. Your focus can be on the language of your thesis. But you cannot be blind to the author, the age, the history of that time, the sociology of that time, the ideas of that time, the cross currents of that time. You cannot be blind to those things. You have to remember that. You still have to remember the life of the author, the psychology of the author, but the tilt of your thesis will be towards the form, which means the language that he has used, the way in which he has used language, the way in which he has used, the imagery and the symbols and the metaphors or other figurative kinds of language. You have to be quite clear on that. Now, if your thesis is tilted towards the content side, for instance, suppose you are writing about the post-colonial ideas in a particular author or in a group of authors, then you are thinking of the content. That does not mean that you can be blind to the form of the text that you are using. You cannot be blind to them. You have to take into account those, and whatever you say about the content has to be in relation to the form. You cannot just forget that there is the form also of that writer, because of that text, because you are writing a thesis on literature. I'm not talking to you about a thesis on linguistics or in linguistics, or I'm not talking to you about a thesis that is written purely in the field of the English language, because that our department is a literature department, and I hope that all of you who have got enrolled recently have got topics that relate to literature. So when you write a thesis, you must remember that every writer or every group of writers that form the part of your thesis either consider form to be more important or the content to be more important, and you have to keep both these aspects alive in your thesis. Though one aspect will be there more. If someone is writing on the, feminist ideas in some writer, then in that case, you are thinking of the content of that particular writer. In that case, you should not forget that that content has been served to the reader in a particular form, and you cannot ignore that form. You have to take into cognizance the form in which something is being served to you. You cannot forget about the form. So what I'm telling you is that when you begin to write, you have to have a lot of things in your mind. And I would say that at this stage, you have to be very careful about the fact that whenever you say something, you acknowledge the original sayers of that thing. Whoever has said that before you cannot be just disregarded by you. Otherwise, your thesis has zero value. It is a thesis in plagiarism and will not be accepted or not be read. All right? Now, doing a thesis means first reading the texts, reading the backgrounds of the texts, and reading the texts, the novels, the poems, the plays, or whatever you are working on. You have to first of all read those and reread them, keep marking them, keep noting points about them as you read them, because if you do not make those points, then you will be unable to write your thesis later. It will become very difficult. So keep making points. Doing research is not a child's job. It is not a piece of cake that you can just eat and say, well, I've finished my piece of cake. No. It is a lot of hard work. And if you do not do that hard work, no one will ever read your thesis apart from your family and friends, and they even may not want to read it because they might find it quite insufferable. All right? So, in order to be read, you have to do a lot of thorough work, which means doing a lot of reading. Without reading, no thesis can be written. That is why you are given 5 or 6 years to complete your thesis. All right? And after you have jotted the points, then you have to read a lot of critical books. You have to read journals. Remember, without journals, there is no research. In our library, there is a provision for every research scholar to get connected with almost any other library in the world, and so you have access to any journal published anywhere. So when you go to the library, you will be told by the librarian or some assistant librarian how to get connected to other libraries. So you can get any article or book or part of a book. Then there is something called Google Books, which will help you to get a few pages of any book that has been published. So you can get some pages from there, or you can put into the search box, the ideas that you are looking for, and wherever those ideas are in that book will be flashed before you. So you have to do a lot of reading, critical reading. Then you have to do a lot of organizing. Your thesis has to be well organized. And now I come to the final part of how you have to write it. You have to make a narrative of your thesis. And this is where your thesis will become very meaningful. How do you make a narrative? You have to tell the reader what you have found. That what your findings have been after you have agreed or disagreed with someone else. After you have read the texts and so many authors, so many scholars and critics. Where have you agreed with and where have you disagreed with people? And what is your conclusion? You have to make a narrative of that. You are telling the reader, I have read all this and after that I am coming to this conclusion. If you do not make a narrative of your thesis, then your thesis will not be read because it will not be interesting enough. It will seem as if you have just cut and pasted. About your reading, about your findings, it has to be a very coherent account of what you have read and absorbed and what you have come to conclude. Ultimately, all this has to be put in the form of a narrative. If it is not put into the form of a narrative, it is hardly a thesis. Because what is the meaning of a thesis? A thesis means this is what I am giving to you. This is the story that I have built, which now you have to build upon. Those who come after me will have to follow what I have already given and will have to go beyond what I have given. I have followed certain people who I am mentioning, and now whoever comes, I am opening my thesis to so and so. When I wrote my thesis on the critical achievement of John Middleton Murray, a critic, alright? And I completed my thesis and submitted it in 1986 and it was accepted then. And then after some months, maybe 6 or 8 months, I got a letter from someone in Mangalore who had got to know that I had done a thesis. And he said that he is going to begin his thesis from where I ended my thesis. And I felt very happy, and then he let me know as he was proceeding what he had written. Now, if you keep publishing a little bit, say half a chapter or something, in a good journal, then lots of people get to know that you are working in this area. You know, when I was doing my thesis, I published something in a journal that was published from Hyderabad. And there was someone who began to debate with me on whatever I was saying. So then he wrote one article and I replied to him, and then he wrote again in reply, and then again I replied. This went on for 5-6 issues of that journal. And so I got to learn a lot, and maybe the other person also got to learn a lot. So doing research means remaining involved in what others are also thinking, not only what you are thinking in a closed room. Then, because I had written my thesis on John Middleton Murray, and at that time, other people had not written so much on his critical writing as I had done. Others had just written on his biography, on his life, his relationship with Catherine Mansfield and D.H. Lawrence and Aldous Huxley. So, because I wrote a whole thesis only on his criticism. So, in his for his birth anniversary in 1989, I was invited to Oxford to talk about whatever I had, discovered regarding John Middleton Murray. I went to the Brasenose College and I spoke in front of several people, and I was very young then. I had, I was very, very immature, but I got the opportunity because my thesis was saying something new. Your thesis must say something new, otherwise it is not a thesis. If you do not contribute something which others have not contributed, then your thesis is not a thesis. So your thesis must say something new. It must add something to whatever has already been pointed out. And it must add that in a very new way. Alright? It must do that in a very new way. It must find new ways of saying something, because you have done your MA in English. So you have read a lot of writers. You have been exposed to good writing. And now you are going to write yourself. So you should be able to write a certain class of writing. You should be able to write in a fairly competent way. And you must be able to narrate what you have discovered. It should not just be a presentation. No, it has to go beyond a presentation. It has to be a report of what you have discovered. And if you have not discovered, then your thesis is hardly a thesis. When you have spent 5 years in one direction, then you must come to some new conclusion, some new discovery. And that will be very important in your thesis. Alright? Which it will go into your conclusion and also be part of the introduction. Now, of course, there's no one hard and fast way of writing a thesis. But I always suggest to my research scholars that they should first write the chapters on the main authors or aspects of an author, one by one. And once they have written that, then they should write the introduction, because then they know what their thesis is about, what they have to introduce. If you first write the introduction, then you have not done your research till then. So how do you know what your thesis is all about? So if you write your introduction first and then you go to the rest of the chapters, then there is something wrong with your method in my approach, but there are some guides who can tell you how to do that, by first writing the introduction. I don't know how that kind of a thesis can be written, but this is what my suggestion is. And in the end, you should write the conclusion. And there should be a straight line movement from the introduction to the conclusion. Every chapter must be linked. Then only it is a thesis. You should not contradict your own self in the next chapter. If you do that, then you are not a proper research scholar. Alright. And I would suggest that at the beginning of every chapter, you should say what the chapter is about. You should say, this is what I'm going to do in this chapter. And that in first para should come after the whole chapter has been written. You know what you have done, and then you write in the beginning of that, this is what I'm going to do, and then you have already done it. Alright? You should say, these are the points that are going to be taken up in this chapter. And then in the second chapter, again do the same thing. If you have already written the chapter and then you bring the first paragraph, then you already know what is in the chapter, and so what your first paragraph is going to say will be very accurate about what you have done in your chapter. Alright? Now, there is a lot to be told to you about thesis writing, and there are lots of teachers. I'm going to talk to you about research methods in my next 1 or 2 lectures that I'm going to give you. After that, other teachers will be giving you lectures. But I will be giving you lectures on research methods. All right? Research methodology and research methods. They are two different things. Research methods are different from research methodology. Remember that. I will tell you about that in my next lecture. My next lecture will most probably be at the same time on next Thursday. Alright, but if there is a change, please keep in touch with me. I will put it up on my Facebook page in case there is a change. I can have it on Wednesday also instead of Thursday. So please be on the lookout for my next lecture. Alright? And remember, writing a thesis is not a very simple thing. So please attend the lectures of all the teachers who are going to talk to you on this subject, and try to understand what research methodology in English studies is, because that will be different from the research methodology of other subjects. Alright? So with this, I'll end my lecture. Thank you very much for listening to me patiently. Goodbye.